Welcome back, everybody. Last class, we focused on semiotics and introducing that theory. And as a reminder, semiotics is a whole system of interpreting signs and how they mediate human feelings, responses, and our actions to these particular signs. This is how we can start to understand how music has meaning to so many different people, to individuals, and within groups and communities. And what we did was that we went over and introduced the three main kinds of sign object relationships, which are icons, indices, and symbols. This class will do a brief semiotics review because it takes a while to really understand these concepts. You have to constantly practice them, and it helps to be exposed to several kinds of examples. But then, after we do a brief review, we'll focus on participatory music making, which is a field, a whole system of values and practices and beliefs around music making that Torino proposes as a useful way of understanding how music has meaning, and why people make music in the way that they make it. To start off our semiotic review, let's remember what our basic definition is. Semiotics is all about the study of signs and symbols and how they're used or interpreted. Remember that for a sign to truly be a sign, it needs to be perceived by an observer and cause an effect in them. If you remember, we also talked about three main sign-object relationships. This is how the sign, so the specific signal or cue, is related to the object, whatever comes to mind, whatever the perceiver connects the sign to. So the first connection we talked about were iconic connections, relationships of resemblance. The easiest way to try and figure out whether a connection is iconic, indexical, or symbolic is to ask, am I perceiving some sort of sameness or difference here? Because iconic relationships are token type relationships. They allow us to perceive form, right? The idea that these sounds that I'm used to hearing, when I hear really harsh electric guitars and nasally loud singing and shouting, high energy drums and noisiness, right? If I hear a song and I think, oh, that this must be a punk song, even if I've never heard it, I'm making a relationship of resemblance between the sign, the song I'm hearing, and the object, the punk genre that comes to mind. And part of why the iconic relationships are so significant in the arts is because it can also help inspire our imaginations to navigate and negotiate between the known and the unknown to create something that's actually new and bring it into a perceivable form. So by using our familiarity with certain sounds and styles, but then also experimenting with the unknown and the things that haven't been done before, that's how artists create new music, how they create new art, and they make all these connections that they then express through their art and bring all of the different parts of themselves together. As for an indexical connection, remember that this is a relationship of co-occurrence. The sign and the object are usually occur together, and that's how the perceiver understands the relationship between the sign and the object. Remember, a good example of this is often when we see smoke, we usually see fire attached to that. If the smoke is the sign itself, the object, the thing that comes to mind is fire because we're used to seeing these things together, right? Part of why an indexical experience is so powerful is that it's usually connected to experience, something we've done, we felt before, we've witnessed, and it feels very powerful, truthful, very authentic and real to us, right? So it's very similar to when you hear a song that you always used to dance to with a family member, and now every time you hear that song, you think about that family member. That's a great example of an indice because no one else is going to have that kind of connection, right, between the song and this particular member of your family because they haven't experienced that, right? So that's a big difference between an icon and an indice. Indices are very personal, icons can be a little bit more generalized because there are quite a few people who can recognize what a punk song is, right? Or recognize what a country artist wears. These are more generalized connections and relationships of resemblance that people are doing. Indexical ones are relationships of co occurrence. We're used to associating the sign and the object together. And then symbol, if you remember, this one's a little bit trickier to find in music because it's so linguistically bound and symbols have to be widely agreed upon. So this is why a great example of a symbol is a definition, right, of a particular word. Last class we talked about how a cat, right, the word cat functions as a symbol that's attached, right? That's indexically connected to other words. You can't understand what a cat is, what its definition is, without other symbols that are indexically linked to it to make sense of the definition of a cat. So remember that symbols are powerful because they come from a place of just general agreement. They're generalized thoughts. They allow us to theoretically analyze things. It's the reason why you can read the text on this screen is because you're making symbolic connections, right? We've assigned meaning and definition to all of the words here that at one point you learned, and now you read that in a context-free manner and can understand the information being presented to you. So that's the power of a symbol, is that it's a context-free way of expressing particular meaning or communication. It's a lot more reliable. If you're trying to communicate with somebody through indexical connections, that's really unstable because it depends on the perceiver's history and experiences. It's so specified. And same with iconic connections. Maybe someone's never heard a punk song, so they wouldn't be able to relate to the song the same way you would, as opposed to if you just literally wrote out the definition of what a punk song is, then people could meet around the specific meaning of the words.